Hi everyone, today I have with me a copy of the limited edition of the 2025 Emperor's Children Codex, which came out just over a month ago now. This video will be a read-through of the front end of the Codex, which is just the lore and the story and the background of the newest faction to be released for Warhammer 40,000. So no rules or anything like that, but just lore, just story and background, and hopefully my voice will do it justice and won't be too annoying. So thanks for watching. The Emperor's Children, the Chosen of Slaanesh. The Illuminated. The galaxy offers a host of experiences to those with the will to indulge. Garish vistas of devastation, deafening soundscapes of torment, and the feel of flesh tearing and bone snapping. The Emperor's Children, the chosen traitor legion of Slaanesh, revel in this visceral joy. Though all others are beneath their contempt, they are driven to share with them the bliss of agony to which degradation has made them privy. These champions of the Dark Prince bestride the battlefield as arrogant grotesques. They are transhuman warriors clad in baroque armour that is alive with sinuous sigils and nauseating colours. Eldritch light glimmers from their bejewelled attire, and clouds of intoxicating musk waft from their pores. They perceive a perfection and nobility in themselves that, in truth, has long since vanished, smothered under warp-tainted excess and blinkered obsession. Theirs is a degenerate hunger and a ceaseless pursuit of the zeniths of sensation. No act of betrayal, pain, or exuberance is beyond them, and with the feverish desperation of addicts, they seek out new vices to gratify. The Emperor's Children, their very name an insult to their origins, have long been a fractured brotherhood. Yet after 10 millennium, still they prey upon the galaxy in vibrant warbands of imperious skill. In every barrage of extravagant firepower, they trumpet their superiority. With every flourish, they carve their poisonous signature. In the tattooed flesh of enthralled mortals, the lacquered flanks of battle tanks, and the shriek of demon-possessed war engines, they proclaim their ecstatic supremacy. Slaanesh's Legion. The Emperor's Children are debauched warriors bound in worship to the chaos god Slaanesh. Wreathed in sweet corruption, twisted in body and mind, they ravage the galaxy in campaigns of gory excess and sensory overload. What tainted remnant remains of their souls is fixated on personal gratification at the expense of all others. The Emperor's Children are the greatest mortal servants of Slaanesh. They are a traitor legion of space marines, hulking warriors forged through genetic alchemy and arcane flesh crafting to be superior in every way to the humans they once were. They tower over ordinary men and women, their hugely muscled frames encased in advanced power armour. Even before they followed their Primarch, Fulgrim, into a gross betrayal of their oaths, they were stronger and swifter than the common herd of humanity. Possessed of incredible resilience, refined reflexes, and heightened mental capacity, they were trained to a pinnacle far above simple soldiery. They wielded some of the greatest weapons of their age and were honed into living exemplars of martial skill. From such a lofty position of prestige, the Emperor's Children have fallen deeper into darkness than many other heretics. They strive to experience ever more extreme sensations, pain and pleasure, ascetic denial, and compulsive excess, lunatic focus, and indiscriminate indulgence. Only the most intense stimuli stir these jaded warriors, and they seek them out with the zealotry of fanatics. Fulgrim's Genesons do not limit themselves to purely physical perceptions, also seeking excess in sight, hearing, and taste through emotions and the application of skill, with biochemical saturation, malefic sorcery, and more besides. The bodies of many are distorted, often through exposure to the warp, the caress of demons, or via abhorrent surgical augmentation, to more readily experience a wealth of sensory input. Some have skin peeled away to expose raw nerve endings. Others go without eyelids, the better for the enlarged ocular orbs to witness as much of the galaxy as possible. There are those whose bones are dislocated or altered, their skulls warped into forms they consider aesthetically pleasing, or mutated into obscene totems in praise of Slaanesh. Many have painful barbs surgically embedded in their flesh, tugging at muscles or lacerating their skin with every movement to provide a frisson of sensation. The flesh of the Emperor's children has become hyper-receptive to stimulus, in many cases melded with their Baroque armour so that their technological autosenses are indivisible from their own mutated organs. The use of combat stims, psychoactive, intoxicants and soul-ravaging narcotics is widespread amongst this decadent legion. Some of these are produced from the rendered flesh of their victims. Emperor's children use them to supplement their perceptions, induce raging emotional peaks, or provoke physical and mental distortions that would inevitably kill those not inured to them. Some of the chemical infusions consumed by the Emperor's children give vibrant shades or textures to their skin, the warriors using their bodies as lurid canvases to excite their own and others' senses. In the same vein, they decorate their armour and the flanks of their battle tanks, artificers of their warbands, carving grotesque scenes that appear to flicker with obscene movement. Lustrous and rare metals, glossy and undulating curves of lacquer, shimmering minerals, fine silks, and foul excretions are all used in clashing combinations that revolt the senses of those who face the Emperor's children in battle. For all their aesthetic extravagance, the Emperor's children are warriors first and foremost. They use battle as an arena of excess and experimentation, needing the next thrilling sensation before the excitement of the last has even faded, obsessing over pushing the experience to greater highs and more sordid lows. Victory in itself is never pleasure enough. The thrill of combat must have played its part. For some of the Legion's debased fighters, this is in the gory rupturing of the enemy, often continued long after the foe has become little more than a mashed chunk of meat. The addiction to painful humiliation is the passion for some, leaving disfigured and howling victims in their wake to testify to their skill. Others revel in wide-scale annihilation, desiring the chance to commit deeds of gross carnage. They have turned their physical prowess and mental strength to the most despicable acts, with shame and dishonour long since excised as fetters for the weak. What the Imperium names as the Era Indomitus is a time of riches and opportunities for the Emperor's children. The Great Rift and the countless other warp storms that blight the galaxy have opened up new avenues of excess and exploitation. The taint of the warp has spread further than it has ever done before. Whole planets have been swallowed by the roiling tides of the immaterium, turned into demon worlds, or warped into nightmarish visions. Mortal cults to Slaanesh flourish in many systems, corrupting societies from within and ripening them into sickening forms. Human and Xenos armies clash in ever more destructive wars. The noise, a siren song that lures Emperor's children warbands to feast on experiences new and exciting in form. The opportunity to prove their superiority in the committing of outlandish atrocities is a temptation the favoured of Slaanesh cannot ignore. The divide between the thrill-seeking hedonists the Emperor's children are, and the noble guardians of humanity they once were, began millennia ago, and has widened ever since. It is a yawning gulf that can never be recrossed. Infinite attractions. Warbands of the Emperor's children have fought their long war against the Imperium, as have many other Chaos Space Marines. For some of Fulgrim's Gene Sons, their bitter hatred for Holy Terror and the armies that fight in its name has become an unholy obsession. Unlike some other traitor legions, however, it is not a compulsive contempt that consumes them all. The Emperor's children see themselves as illuminated to the manifold experiences of existence. They revel in a host of passions and manias and believe it is a tedious individual that restricts their obsession to a single idea. Visceral hatred grips the hearts of many Emperor's children, but so do pain and joy, horror and humiliation. The pleasures of dominion over others, of inflicting cruel torments, or of sublime swordsmanship devolving into maniacal hacking, are all worthy in their tainted perceptions. The Scouring. After the traitor Space Marines were hurled back from the walls of the Emperor's palace, the survivors of the Loyalist legions were united by a desire for vengeance. They sought to purge those brothers that had turned to darkness, following on their heels with the focus of a pride of lions on the hunt. The period that followed was known as the Scouring. The traitor legions and their twisted primarchs continued to fight, no longer for the conquest of the Imperium, but for their own survival. War was so incessant that at times the threat to the Emperor's realm was almost as great as at the peak of the heresy. The wars of the Scouring lasted many years and almost exhausted the manifold armies of terror. The Loyalists eventually hounded their turncoat brethren into the Eye of Terror. It became both a prison and stronghold to the traitors, but offered a stable space lane. Genesis of perfection. 10,000 years ago, when the Emperor of Mankind began his great crusade to forge an empire across the stars, he created the Primarchs. These 20 beings were numinous demigods, created via eldritch science using the Emperor's towering genius. As their creator, he was their father, and they were his sons, intended as the generals of his armies in the conquests to come. Tragedy struck before the Primarchs were fully formed, some apocalyptic catastrophe scattering the nascent beings to worlds across the galaxy. Yet already the Emperor had embarked on the next stage of his great crusade. From salvaged genetic elements of each of the Primarchs, he created a legion of Space Marines, with the third legion wrought from a portion of the Primarch Fulgrim's essence. These Legione Astartes formed the brutally powerful vanguard of the Emperor's almost inexhaustible armies, fighting at the forefront of the Great Crusade to conquer the galaxy. Apocryphal references within now forbidden data tablets claim the warriors of the Third Legion were known as the Emperor's children from an early stage. There are accounts of individual officers of the Legion serving as emissaries, envoys, and standard-bearers for the Emperor. The Legion as a whole were of noble bearing, and lauded as exemplars against whom others were judged. Nothing proved the high esteem in which the Legion was held more than their entitlement to bear the Palatine Aquila, the Emperor's personal heraldic device, as part of their insignia. This honour was won by the actions of a cohort of the Legion's warriors, who safeguarded the Emperor during an attempt on his life, fighting and dying to the last Space Marine in his service. In time, as the Emperor and his armies fought ever more distant wars throughout the galaxy, the lost Primarchs were slowly rediscovered. The primogenitor of the Third Legion was found on the grey and deprived mining world of Chemos. Fulgrim was united with the Emperor and with his Gene Sons, and granted command of the Legion. It is said to have been his inspiring words of hope and destiny to the Third Legion that moved the Emperor to affirm the Brotherhood's cognomen. As the Emperor's children, with Fulgrim at their head and bearing the Master of Mankind's standard, there seemed no heights of excellence to which the Legion could not rise. Fulgrim instilled the Emperor's children with a drive for excellence in every aspect of their existence. They sought perfection in making war, from individual mastery of weapons and tactics to the finessing of grand strategies. They adopted and refined the doctrines they witnessed amongst the other legions, aiming not only to equal their peers but to surpass them. Fulgrim stood as the exemplar from whom his senior officers took their lead in all things, ideals spreading down each rank of hierarchy, such that the whole legion was inspired by the achievements of others. It cannot be known when exactly a stain began to spread across the legion's collective soul. Pride in their abilities curdled into contempt for those they saw as less than themselves. Perhaps there had been a weakness there all along, a chink in the armour ready to be exploited. When his brother Primarch Horus Lupercal turned traitor and initiated the galaxy-spanning heresy, Fulgrim was amongst those who fought with him. His ideals, twisted through demonic influence, Xenos taint, and calculated appeals by Horus, seeped through the Legion's command structure to contaminate the rest of the Emperor's children. The Horus heresy was a conflict waged across the known galaxy, but at last Horus's armies assaulted Holy Terra itself, and the Emperor's children were among them. Few of the Legion fought in the legendary battles at the Imperial Palace. Instead, many of Fulgrim's Gene's sons indulged their own need for the thrill of battle across the face of the planet. Eventually, through terrible sacrifice, the Emperor killed Horus. At a stroke, the heresy had failed, and the traitors, leaderless, fled Terra. Along with most of the heretics, Fulgrim led his legion towards the Eye of Terror, a huge warp rift in the galactic north. They were hounded by a boiling tide of imperial vengeance, but the heresy had sorely weakened the Imperium. Such was the threat of traitor strongholds throughout the galaxy, and a resurgence of myriad Xenos preying on vulnerable human worlds, that the Imperial armies could not afford to dive into the warp-tainted region of the Eye of Terror to finish the traitors off. Survival soon became the primary concern of the Emperor's children, as it was for all of the traitor legions. During their flight, they had raided Imperial worlds. In the Eye of Terror, where the power of the warp suffused planets with mutation and demons held sway, existence became more tenuous. It was not long before the traitors began to prey upon each other. The Emperor's children were amongst the most eager. Fulgrim grew more distant from his sons. Blessed with demonhood, he sought new realms, looking for experiences yet unfelt. Without his dominant command, under attack from other traitors and each other, the Emperor's children fractured into countless warbands. Excess and obsession are the domains of the chaos god Slaanesh. Dark temptations, unfulfilled desires, and compulsive dreams are claimed by his servants as both lying at the heart of his power and fueling it. Slaanesh's taint reaches into everything mortals strive for. The more extreme these cravings, the deeper into damnation mortals sink. Slaanesh's demons whisper into the dreams of even the most self-effacing, or sing siren songs through the warp, eroding restraint and luring mortals into the worship of Slaanesh through their deeds before they are aware of it. All it takes, they hiss, is one more step. Arenas of iniquity. Emperor's Children warbands have claimed a variety of bases for themselves across the millennia. Many of their lords demand the building of outlandish fortresses and monumental tributes to their greatness. A few have wrested control of a whole demon world, holding back the tides of warp-spawned entities in gladiatorial tourneys to prove themselves Slaanesh's greatest servants. Other warbands have holdings beyond any warp rift, erecting palaces of flesh that rise above mountainous plateaux, or dispatching their raids from prismatic bastions that circle worlds like shimmering orbitals. Many Emperor's Children warbands operate as fleet-based hedonists. These pleasure nomads sate their gratification wherever whim leads them, and their mobility makes them nigh impossible to hunt down. After every wanton massacre of a world's defenders, they reap a tally of fresh resources, often including a harvest of the choicest biomaterial. They soon vanish into the void, leaving behind another world, a victim of their excesses. Orchestrating destruction. When the Emperor's children stride to war, a tumultuous barrage of sensations assault their chosen arena. The very air shivers in fearful expectation. Painfully euphoric sights and sounds deluge their foes in visceral kaleidoscopes. Each battle is an opportunity to display their superior warcraft and to instigate the most extreme feelings. The Emperor's children perpetrate their decadent campaigns throughout the galaxy to further their own stimulation. For some, warfare is a means to praise Slaanesh, seeking the Dark Prince's favour by enacting the most depraved atrocities or corrupting those ideals held sacred by others. Others seek to emulate and surpass the glories of the Legion of old, or brand themselves upon the galaxy in infamy and immortality by raising an empire dedicated to excess. Some hunger for martial perfection and nobility, incapable of seeing their own gruesome perversion in all they achieve. Some lust for vengeance, desire to glut themselves on forbidden knowledge, or covet cursed artifacts, or far more mundane resources to fuel their endless predations. Some yearn to exceed the limits of their biologies through whatever chemical, surgical, or sorcerous route offers that chance. Whatever they claim, to others or themselves, all joyously enter battle to feel and inflict as much bodily and mental suffering as possible, and to revel in its creation. The first warning of an Emperor's Children assault is a deluge of overwhelming sensation. Subtlety and restraint have their place amongst many of their champions' arsenals, but they are fleetingly employed, and usually only amid battle, to prolong an enemy's suffering. Thus, a trumpeted herald of woe is delivered to ensure that none doubt the magnificent excess about to be visited upon them. In some cases, this is a biochemical barrage that inflames the skies with painful colour, or seeds the air with empiric musks that scour the enemy's lungs or ignite their passions. In others, the Emperor's children unleash apocalyptic devastation with orbital bombardments and lance strikes, creating a hellish landscape of burning cities and razed fortresses to be a backlit arena fit for their warriors' own murderous deeds. Cacophonous oral assaults blare from the emitters of gilded fighter craft, rupturing eardrums and distorting weather patterns. Burrowing torpedoes carrying hallucinatory concoctions corrupt water tables. Demonic sigils that cause waking nightmares burn in the skies above population centres, stoking unreasoning fear or dangerous lusts, causing anarchy among defending armies. With their approach announced, the Emperor's children descend. Dropcraft and gunboats in eye-watering livery scream through the skies, their cannons raking choice defensive emplacements. They broadcast soul-rending screeches and shrouding barrages of sickly sweet smoke. The keening of loved ones and the rasping of razor-edged blades can be heard by those with their shrivelled wits remaining, even above the deafening oral assault. Then come the Emperor's children, racing from dropships, on foot or within the fleshy interiors of gaudy transports in a hungry eagerness to close with those who can still scream. No two assaults are the same. The prideful champions and lords who lead their war bands see themselves as master artisans raised far above dull doctrine and pedestrian strategy, and abhor any repetition that may impugn their reputation in the eyes of rivals. They seek to unleash ever more diverse displays of obscene violence to discover the elusive hint of fresh experience. There are those Emperor's Children commanders, however, who are so fixated upon a single distorted strategic vision that they slavishly seek to render it in some imagined perfect form again and again, often hurling increasingly excessive amounts of material forward to achieve some pivotal ploy. Those who follow such warlords are often as myopic as their leaders, or are so lost to the thrill of sensation as not to care for any strategy as long as it allows them to indulge their lust for battle. Whether following some complex battle plan or losing themselves in hedonistic whirlwinds of slaughter, the sons of Fulgrim fight with a flamboyant style that no sane warrior could match. Infractors enter the fray with murderous artistry, often powering into the first foe they sight, slicing, hacking, and skewering with great sweeps and violent thrusts of their razor-sharp blades. They swiftly move on to the next, howling vox-augmented battle cries that rise above any they have merely maimed, to create a harmony to unnerve even disciplined troops. Squads of tormentors are rarely far behind. They often compete with infractors for similar crops of victims, but use salvos of explosive bolts and deadly arranged weapons to tear shuddering death rattles, screamed pleas, or the sweet moans of pain from those they target. Aesthetes of agony. Amongst Fulgrim's scions, some of whom are ancient veterans who have survived since the Horus Heresy, are even greater martial elites. Warped-infused sword fighters known as Flawless Blades hunt down the strongest enemy warriors. Chaos Terminators appear in blazes of teleportation energy or burst from the ramps of armoured transport tanks. These hulking brutes have seized ancient suits of tactical dreadnought armour, making each capable of withstanding horrific attacks that would disintegrate lesser warriors. These elite demand their place at the sites of the finest opportunities for sensory fulfillment. They breach the bridges of void ships and command bunkers to prey upon the enemy's vaunted warriors. Whatever warp-powered strength or multi-layered battle plate they possess is but a flickering lamp beside the roaring inferno of their ego, and they will suffer none to deny them their prize. Battle tanks of the Emperor's Children grind forward on barbed tracks, with the crew's sensoriums bionically meshed or horrifically melded with the logic cores of their kill counters. Every violent death sends surges of pleasure into their cortexes. The tanks spit heavy shells and lances of energy into the favoured targets of the crews, each armoured vehicle said to have its own fell reputation and insatiable lust to harm a particular form of victim. The machine spirits of some war engines are so thirsty for particular souls or flesh that they bypass their commander's raw demands. Thus are born legends such as Morkyrus's Sin Manglers. This squadron of land raiders and their forever entombed crews once fought for Lord Zarian the Distorted. Since the Battle of the Scarlet Mound, however, their powerful las cannons have refused to fire upon enemy soldiers, the weapons systems only permitting targeting solutions that might result in worthy engine kills. They will gladly plough into oncoming warriors, however, but only to enable their tooth-covered tracks to grind their flesh into heaped piles. Scoreflints. This nerve-shredding stimulant is one of countless concoctions distilled to gift the user with shuddering peaks of scintillating agony and voids of desperate need. It is said to deliciously sharpen the imbiber's reactions as they hungrily seek to experience its effects on their sensoriums in diverse combinations of expectation and indulgence. Languor's riposte. Those Emperor's Children who relish the opportunity to prove themselves the masters of their own flesh may dare swallowing one of the many living draughts known as Languor's riposte. These semi-sentient brews congeal in their bodies, attempting to reconstitute into whatever form they once bore in life, fighting against the warrior's skin, bones, and muscles for dominance in an excruciating contest of will and endurance. Favoured of Slaanesh. With time, enough blood is shed by an Emperor's Children warband, enough torment reaped and savoured, that the barriers separating real space from the warp are weakened. This is a moment of unbridled delight for the sons of Fulgrim. The reek of fear and bodily fluids saturates the air, rivaling the stink of physaline and charred flesh. Orgiastic convulsions begin to claim some of the enemy, as raw emotion seeps into the cracks of their minds. Strange chemicals condense from the pores of Emperor's Children lost to delirious excess, trickling into their mouths and stimulating agony and pleasure. Alluring witchlights sparkle amidst detonations, and sibilant whispers sound in the hiss of energy discharges and the screams of those in pain. Such portents are said by the Emperor's Children to presage a more glorious tide of sensation. The actions of the most depraved, or blessed, of the warband are said to draw this momentous moment closer. Sorcerers lash out with psychic torments. They flay skin with scintillating empiric shards, peel open mental barriers, and offer flesh-filled curses, gifting their otherworldly boons to the ungrateful enemy. Then there are the demon engines, gigantic war machines that take many terrifying forms, but are empowered by a malefic entity from the warp. Emperor's Children warbands hail these infernal devices as majestic creations of art and pain, for the demon at their heart is painfully bound and tormented. Sensations it inflicts 100-fold on the quailing enemies before it. While some prowl on mighty piston-driven limbs, or roll forward on skull-crushing treads, others soar through the skies on jagged wings, or float on sorcerous vapours. The raw spite that seeps out of them, hating yet fascinated by its mortal allies, is so intoxicating that many Emperor's Children warbands build entire strategies around their deployment, seeking to remain near them at all times, that they might sup from the emotional fug that demon engines emit. Those Emperor's Children who, like their gene sire, have received the greatest gift of demonhood, are said to wear away the barriers of the warp with their very presence. These demon princes have achieved a horrific apotheosis, blessed with power and immortality, but enslaved in body and soul to Slaanesh for all eternity. To face such a paragon of vice and obsession is to see the once noble bearing of the Space Marines brought to the ultimate nadir. When the Emperor's Children have, by design or inadvertently via their own hedonistic desires, committed massacres and atrocities so vile that reality itself weeps, the barriers may weaken enough for the demons of Slaanesh to break through. Some Emperor's Children see such an event as a final anointing of their work, a divine leer of approval from their deity that their work has drawn great favour. The grim arenas of butchery they have created, and the remaining souls therein, become a stage of empiric insanity. The warriors leave the place, ritually gifting it to the bounding and dancing demons of the Dark Prince. Such sites often become warp interstices, or the beginnings of entire demon worlds, even if only temporarily. But the Emperor's Children are conscious that with the demon's changeable whim, they may decide to seek sustenance from the Emperor's Children themselves, should Fulgrim's sons have left too few other mortals alive. Other warbands actively seek out such transgressive alliances. These Emperor's Children walk a far more dangerous path, but the rewards can be great indeed. Pacts can be forged with some demons, parleys bought with bartered souls, and etched in the very worst agonies. Forbidden knowledge and arcane power can be secured, the routes to worlds of opportunity, or the services of demons in future wars, if, that is, the Emperor's children display a sufficiently pleasing depravity. Sacrifices must be made for such power, and Fulgrim's champions will promise defilements beyond sanity, or willingly give up to the demons those warriors who have failed them in return. Fulgrim's scions and their deities' immortal servants seal their damned alliance by wreaking torment and bloody carnage on scales their victims' worlds will never recover from. Codicea Marius spasmed as Fulgrim poured his essence from the warp into the Space Marine's flesh. As he attuned his senses to the stimuli of real space, Fulgrim heard the crunch of pulverizing flesh and bone. There was a squeal of shearing armour, and then a thunderclap of empiric detonation. Violet fire and charred chunks sprayed from the ruin of the ultramarine librarian's body. Mist boiled around the accreting demon Primarch as he sculpted a suitable form for himself. Vivid hues swam in the striated mist, as did the shadows of sinuous things that danced and sang. They were his chorus, here to direct his mortal audience in the proper appreciation of his performance. He favoured them with a theatrical grin as he completed his form. With a flick of one hand, Fulgrim banished the mist. It burnt away in a violent royal of warp flame to reveal a battlefield. He ignored the drudgery of the view, a desaturated landscape blighted by a vulgar fortress, and looked upon his sons in their adequate finery fighting ultramarines, whose blue armour was as bland as their souls. Some of the Emperor's children raised their voices to him in jubilant praise, at turns sonorous and guttural. A handful of ultramarines turned to Fulgrim with cries of dismay and alarm, raising weapons in his direction. The nearest of them could not even manage that, instead shuddering with paroxysms or clawing at their rebreathers as his musk swept over them. He raised his elegant wings in exultation, and with an indulgent smile poised on his lips, he basked in the adulation of them all. He had no doubt his arrival elevated them, his sons and Guilliman's alike, in sublime ecstasy. Fulgrim turned with a rhythmic ripple of undulation and a susurrus of polished scales, weaving aside from an insultingly meagre volley of fire that came his way. A glance with heavy-lidded eyes told him all he needed to know of the battle's disposition. His sons were on the brink of being routed. They had recklessly pushed forward, unsupported on numerous fronts. Squads of them lunged after the ultramarines. Prettily garish battle tanks jostled with each other for firing positions. Cohesion sacrificed for greed. Individual champions swept into the Loyalists' lines with shrieks of challenge. Fulgrim leered at their enjoyment. Only his sons, it seemed, were attempting to enliven this dreary vista with colour. Ultramarines were falling to their attacks, gutted by crackling blades, sundered by detonating shells, and carved open by dazzling energies. But Gulliman's sons were tediously playing their own game. They cleaved to staid doctrines, holding, redeploying, counter-attacking. He could practically hear the tick-tock of their mental processes, and his lip curled in a sneer. Fulgrim's supernatural senses were caught by a flash of heraldry. An ultramarine officer was coordinating the defence of the fortress. Fulgrim detected the play of vox signals centred on the warrior, saw him give curt visual signs and display a modicum of skill with a long power sword. Fulgrim hissed a chuckle as he now saw his role in this little pageant. He willed himself into the air and sang a lilting ululation, as beautiful to his ears as it was agonising to the dismal loyalists. Fulgrim levelled a sword at the ultramarine officer in obvious challenge. He banked suddenly, lunging to the ground and into a battery of artillery tanks. With a vicious slice of one blade, he skewered the engine block of one. He spiralled, bringing two more blades around to slice the turret from the second, while a lash of his tail flipped the third over, its armour cracking and explosions gutting it from inside. In the space of 6 mortal heartbeats, the battery was annihilated. Fulgrim sped from one temporary diversion to the next. He beheaded and bisected his victims and left others kneeling in pools of viscera, convulsing with toxic shock or crawling with a single limb remaining. With every kill, Fulgrim looked toward the ultramarine officer, drawing out the moment. He used the battlefield as his stage, circling towards his prey and ensuring none were in doubt as to his eventual target. More firepower came his way. Guilliman's sons, aware of the direst threat. Much of it flew wide, lured away by phantasmal constructs and illusory geists. Some shots bent in mid-air and others burnt away in a nimbus that shone from him. A few shots hit. Fulgrim relished the kiss of pain, teasing the wounds wider with the fingers of a spare hand. Eventually, Fulgrim tired, abandoning his circling performance in his lust to enact the denouement. The weakling had surrounded himself with fawning servants. Fulgrim dealt with them in turn. He gifted each with a single killing stroke before any could react, then rose to loom over the officer. The fool held his ground, sword raised in an appallingly obvious bait. Fulgrim slashed downwards. The officer barely parried the teasing strike. The Primarch turned it into a backhand hack. He restrained himself to prolong the fight, his other weapons held high to threaten, but remaining unused. He traded 5 blows, feeling the ultramarine strength and will sapped with each one. Suddenly, all thrill seeped from Fulgrim and his passions waned. Idly, he plunged all his blades into the ultramarine. The warrior succumbed immediately to the blade's warp toxins. Fulgrim flicked the spasming corpse away, already bored. He heard his sons, racing with eagerness into the shocked ultramarine survivors. Fulgrim opened up his senses, needing to feel something more. There were more of Guilliman's sons to kill. Maybe he would stay and take his time over them. A many-splintered myriad. The war leaders of the Emperor's children are devoted to individual obsessions and lavish ambitions. It is no surprise, then, that they organise and identify the warriors under their command in dizzying variety to reflect what they see as their unique superiority. Warbands of the former Legion have ravaged the galaxy under numerous guises for 10 millennia, splitting and reforming in new hierarchies, often violently, to bring their abhorrent artistry to bear in blissful new facets. Not since the Legion Wars has there been any notion of a coherent Emperor's Children Legion. Since then, most of their warriors have fought in warbands and have grown around a central leader with overwhelming power and presence. Just as Fulgrim embodied the ideals and direction of the Legion of old, so the Lords of the Emperor's Children are the focus and driver of their warriors' actions in the era Indomitus. Each of these commanders is consumed with a prideful arrogance. Convinced of their preeminence over their warriors, they jealously guard their positions. None suffer any challenge to go unanswered. While some may surround themselves with coteries of sub-commanders and lieutenants, these are typically sycophants and fawning celebrants with no real influence. Other champions tacitly encourage the advancement of their spiteful underlings. indulging a frisson of danger at the idea of circling plots to unseat them. The leaders of Emperor's Children warbands give themselves all manner of extravagant titles. Many draw them from epithets screamed at them by victims or enemies, pluck them from their own fevered dreams or the whispers of demons, or affect ranks and entitlements inspired by the Legion's history. Equally, the hierarchy of one warband can differ markedly from that of another. Some continue to use variations on terminology and organisational credos employed millennia ago, whether through some ingrained fixation or delighting in perverting their original meaning. Thus, some warbands refer to themselves as millennials and divide their assets between several cohorts and companies. Other champions label their warbands as myriads, hosts, revelliums, exaltations, and the like, while referring to the component formations of infantry and armour within them as spectacles, collectives, carousals, or other, even stranger terms. The result is usually the same. It is also, ironically, far more simplistic than such grandiose titles would suggest. A single, preeminent lord who suffers no rivals, often ringed by a small coterie of lesser champions, and leading a single warband comprising multiple bands of warriors who typically fight as much in spiteful competition with one another as they do as brothers. There are warbands of Emperor's Children, only a dozen warriors in strength, and others that number well over 1,000. Few, however, grow to amass overwhelming numbers of the kind favoured by traitor legions such as the Death Guard and Iron Warriors, who specialise in grinding attrition. To some extent, this reflects the thrill-seeking ways of war of Fulgrim's sons, but it is also a consequence of their corrupted and overloaded psyches. Only the most potent charisma and vision can serve to weld the warriors and champions of multiple warbands together. Fulgrim, if he cared to bend his will to it, could surely do so. A few powerful legionaries have attempted to reunite huge elements of the Emperor's Children, rarely with any goal beyond their personal gain, but the cocktail of greed, lust, and spite in such groups means most do not last long, fragmenting into new forms to pursue their obsessions. Echoes of infamy. The Emperor's Children are frequently boastful, proclaiming their exploits so that others may learn to fear and exalt them. Some broadcast them in screamed astropathic sirens. Others memorialise them in repulsive monuments of living flesh or stitch sorcerous sigils into the warp. The many warbands of Emperor's Children jealously guard their individual infamy, glorying in their own divergent depravity. Those of the glittering myriad have carved a horrific reputation for blindingly swift armoured assaults across the eastern reaches of the Reductus sector. Lord Esclamos leads them, styling himself the Silvered Regent. His shimmering flesh and the mirrored orbs of his eyes are replaced after every battle by flayed servo-thralls, while he demands his warband emulate his attire with gilded battleplate and opalescent war engines. The Constrictus, meanwhile, lay claim to reputations as glorious artisans. The prismatic pyre they erect upon the site of their every victory is comprised of the eyeballs of those they have chosen to leave alive. These hideous fleshy bonfires burn as the warriors leave, their living victims crawling blindly about their fallen realm. The warriors of the Transcendent Spectacle warband boast in living murals of screaming thralls their expertise in goading their countless demon engines to the very best soul feasts, while those of the Threnodic choir orchestrate their battles to instigate wailing harmonies that destabilize tectonic plates. These are but some of the former legion's infamous warbands, but there are many more. Warband assets. The resources of Emperor's Children warbands are as diverse as their patterns of organisation. Each warband maintains a fleet of ancient and powerful warships to ensure the swift and opportunistic capture of any prey or prize that attracts their leader's impulses. Depending on the warlord's power and influence, as well as their predilections, such fleets can range from a handful of sleek and heavily armoured destroyers to huge flotillas headed by battleships and grand cruisers. The gaudily ornamented vessels of Emperor's Children warbands are gravid with attack craft and arsenals of boarding torpedoes, and contain hangars strung with dropships. These craft can deliver Fulgrim's sons onto planetary surfaces or into the bowels of a void-born target with surgical precision. Besides squads and retinues of egotistical warriors, warbands can often call on other assets should the mood strike their commander. Some have covens of mortal Slaanesh worshippers in their thrall, or packs of the Dark Prince's demonic servants, ready to be summoned from the warp. Others harbour armoured detachments of battle tanks and combat walkers, or super-heavy assets that can bring whole hive cities to their knees. Some warbands leash huge numbers of demon engines to their command, while others have lances of depraved chaos knights sworn to their cause by fell pacts. Fulgrim, demon primarch of the Emperor's Children. Excess and obsession given repulsive form, Fulgrim is one of the greatest servants of the chaos god Slaanesh. He is a defiler of nobility, a serpentine spitter upon oaths, a sadist, an Epicurean, and an artist of the grotesque, and there are no extremes to which he will not slither. Where once Fulgrim embodied human skill, refinement, and progress, and the drive to achieve perfection in all things, now he is a vessel of the most depraved corruption. Where he once nurtured his gene sons and exalted their deeds, now they are but one diversion amongst many to an entity steeped in the immortal passions of the warp. Fulgrim is the gene sire and lord of his decadent traitor legion, but he does not yoke his sons or himself to any manner of formalised hierarchy. Since his ascension to demonhood millennia ago, Fulgrim has spent long periods away from the scattered warbands that were once his legion. He pursues esoteric experiences across real space and in the warp, upon demon worlds in the interstice between the two, and in stranger realms besides, leaving his scions to their own ambitions. At other times, he has appeared to groups of his sons, sometimes unlooked for, at others in apparent answer to their ritualized pleas for his intoxicating presence. These are times of woe for entire subsectors of space, as Fulgrim leads his gene sons in carnivals of bloodshed and destruction, favouring his warriors and his enemies alike with the vibrancy of his supernatural charisma and the sight of his sublime skill at arms. Despite Fulgrim's inconstant devotion to what remains of his legion, all but a handful of his sons adore and idolise him. Many Emperor's children spend their existences searching for him, haunted by a gnawing need to bask in his visceral presence, to know but a sliver of his thoughts, or witness his sublime artistry in a single battle. Fulgrim is revered and even worshipped by devotees across the galaxy, by many of his transhuman gene sons, mortal cultists, and even some Xenos. There are warbands of Emperor's children who seek him out, following tales that reverberate around the galaxy of their gene sire holding court on a hidden demon world. Most fail to reach their goal, falling to rivals, being destroyed or led astray in the tides of the warp, or suffering one of many other fates. Yet the unspeakable acts of destruction and perverse depravity they indulge in during their quests to seek Fulgrim's lair are said to draw the eye of Slaanesh. Indeed, Many who set out to join their gene-sire in his revels have risen in obscene power without ever seeing him. Even before his demonic apotheosis, Fulgrim was capricious and volatile, with intense passions for all manner of subjects, martial, scholarly, aesthetic, and more, which could change on a whim. His turbulent emotions, his conflicting paranoia and towering self-confidence, as well as his desperate need to better himself and his legion, would ultimately lead Fulgrim to turn traitor and slide into the worship of Slaanesh. There are precious few accounts of his deeds during the Horus Heresy, but the Iron Hands and Ultramarines hold Fulgrim in special loathing. Their chapter legends condemn him for the felling of their loyal primogenitors, Ferrus Manus and Reboot Guilliman. Fulgrim's emotions have only intensified with the passage of millennia in real space, and uncounted eons of existence in the warp. When he manifests amongst his sons, he seeks to glut himself on as varied a palette of experience as possible. If in one battle he crafts an exquisite strategy to bring the foe to pain, grief, and humiliation, in the next he may abandon all tactics to vent his warp-born strength and reflexes in a gory rush of reckless evisceration, with not a single thought for his followers save a splinter of contempt. His elongated body ripples with muscle. His great wings of taut skin bear him aloft in defiance of physical laws. Poisons drip from his blades. A nimbus of sorcerous illusion glints from his writhing form, and lust for new sensation glows in his eyes as he surges from one violent course to the next in a banquet of experience. The arsenal of excess. When Fulgrim manifests in real space, he gilds his form in a panoply of exotic textures, colours, and scents, radiating a hideous beauty according to his whims. He often favours alluring, polished features and serrated reptilian scales, lacquered armour in eye-bleeding shades, and reeking perfumed robes. Strings of glistening ampules and bells tingle with his every movement. In hands that may be graceful or monstrous in one battle, and sheathed in fluted armoured gauntlets the next, he has variously wielded long iridescent polearms, sentient swords, and twitching whips of barbed sinew, or has instead flexed hands tipped with talons that drip with warp-wrought venom. Such armaments are usually formed at will from his own essence. At other times, Fulgrim has instead taken up a physical artefact, a weapon plucked as a trophy from a challenger's corpse, glittering jewels formed from the rendered essences of willing thralls, or the peeled flesh of a foe worn as a gruesome fetish, if, that is, he deems their form fitting enough to be borne by a being such as he. Some Emperor's children speculate on the display of a heavy-bladed broadsword in Fulgrim's arsenal. It appears perfect in form, but lacks the ornamentation of the demon Primarch's usual flair. None would dare ask their gene-sire directly, but assume it to be none other than Fireblade, the sword said to have been forged by Ferrus Manus, and gifted to Fulgrim as a sign of their brotherhood. The same blade with which the Lord of the Emperor's children took his brother's head. Some believe it to be the original, somehow preserved after 10 millennia. Others swear it is a manifestation of Fulgrim's demonic subconscious, forming in his grasp in response to some buried desire. Salvequine tears. These pickled strips of artificial neural webbing are stitched into the brain matter of some emperor's children. Those Epicureans who demand their insertion claim to be able to discern the graphic final sensations of torment to which these fibres were subjected. Twisted into an unholy circuit by dark magi, they elicit screams of pain from the warrior when stimulated by battle, yet are all too soon drained. The Lords of Excess. Those who rise to effulgent prominence over the warbands of Fulgrim's sons are obsessive generals, decadent exhibitionists, torturous murderers, and more besides. All have compulsions and manias as fickle or eternal as their Primarch's whims. To the Emperor's children, no realm of excess is beyond them. Those with the intellect and power to indulge their every depraved whim have, across millennia, delved into all manner of specialist esoterica. Some perfect biochemical alteration, forbidden technologies, or foment pleasure cults to Slaanesh. At the Legion's heart, however, is the driving need to dominate through martial superiority, through personal skill at arms and strategic foresight, and with monstrous ego they lord their dominance of war over others. Lords Exultant. Amongst the champions of the Emperor's children, Lords Exultant are sadistic strategists. They view the battlefield as an exhibition arena where only they are worthy to perform. Many warbands are led by one of these charismatic and powerful commanders. They are warrior lords who dominate through superior acumen, martial prowess, and an inventive and inexhaustive supply of cruel imagination. Some of these champions are ancient heretics who claim to have been amongst the Legion's officer class at the time of the Horus Heresy. Others have fought their way to the heady heights of command in the millennia since, carving out retinues and warbands to fulfill their need for dominion. Lords Exultant are precision combatants who frequently take to battle wielding masterwork weapons accentuated with garish ornamentation. Others acquire warp-tainted blades or whips, etched with eldritch sigils in praise of the Dark Prince, or even inhabited by bound demonic entities. Bending a demon to their will, or dominating an enemy champion in the dance of a duel, is, however, too personal and narrow a triumph to satiate a Lord Exultant for long. They prefer a wider audience and a more complex test of their martial superiority. In battle, they revel in every fresh challenge posed by their enemies, for each allows them to display their superiority and expose their foes' unforgivable flaws. The obsession evident throughout their legion is turned by Lords Exultant towards outmaneuvering enemy commanders, using their heightened strategic awareness, tactical expertise, and overstimulated sensorium to outthink their rivals. Some possess hyper-intuitive abilities. Some can perceive the minute vibrations of infiltrating assassins, scent trace elements of chemical exhaust upon the wind to tell of closing armour divisions, or compulsively tally the enemy's dwindling ammunition in gloating anticipation of their failure. Lords Exultant direct their warriors' firepower with scalpel precision to drive back or crack open advancing enemy war engines. They bog down the foe's elite warriors with disposable followers, stymie the arrival of reinforcements, and break the sanity of inspirational orators. They allow all to witness their opponent's strategic ploys play out, only to counter them in stunning and ostentatious style, leaving friend and foe in no doubt at all as to the true master of the battlefield. The Warp-Touched. For every lord making his grisly mark upon the galaxy, countless champions are vying for the favour of Slaanesh. They seek the boons of the Chaos God and the power of the Warp. The gifts of the Dark Prince are potent indeed, but nothing is given without a price. The route to incredible power and unutterable damnation alike is known as the path to glory. It is named by those absolutely convinced of their unerring route to greatness, as they scorn all those who were consumed in the process as weaklings and fools. Demon Princes of Slaanesh. Infernal monsters that tower over the mortals they lead to battle, Demon Princes of Slaanesh bask in their deity's most potent supernatural gifts, each a unique nightmare vision of excess and obsession made flesh. One may be wreathed in strange scents, that arrive directly in the minds of those around them to incite terror and pleasure. Another might be goaded into battle by a blissful agony that makes them shriek in delight. Yet others may vomit toxin barbs, howl with such deafening power as to shatter bones, or be covered in iron-hard scales that excruciatingly chafe their own folds of skin. In battle, demon princes stride through the ruin and malefic horror they unleash on bestial limbs. Some plunge into their victims from the air, soaring on wings that may be leathery or diaphanous, or riding perfumed clouds of sorcery. They disdainfully ignore the pitiful shots cast at them, their unnatural laughter driving foes to the edge of fear. Warp energy sizzles from their eyes, and floral flames curl from their leering maws as they speak dread phrases that kill as sure as any blade. Each is a nightmarish expression of Slaanesh given form. The ultimate ambition of most Emperor's children is to achieve immortality. For the devotees of Slaanesh, this is far from an impossible goal. Those few who walk the path to glory to its apex are granted the prize of eternal life. Countless aspirants of excess will fall by the wayside, but a supremely talented servant will be driven, salivating, to clamber over mountains of the slain and tormented until he reaches the pinnacle of his obsessive craft. Over the centuries or millennia, such champions offer up sacrifices on ghastly scales, the rendering down of a hive city's armies for a single drop of potent elixir, the torture of a sainted hero after breaking their will, perhaps the driving of a worthy foe into the worship of Slaanesh. For murder alone is not enough. Only those who further the cause of the Dark Prince again and again receive the precious gift of demonhood. They are raised to become demigods, screaming their triumph as their new bodies swell with the energies of the warp. Sorcerers. Unlike those in some of the traitor legions, the sorcerers of the Emperor's children are seen as gifted and blessed. These battle psychers are capable of manifesting the power of Slaanesh, whether for the delicious appreciation of their fellow Emperor's children or the mind-crawling horror of their foes. Often, it is both. Psychers are highly valued by the Emperor's children as both potential recruits to raise as brother legionaries and as empiric playthings. Such psychic victims can be tortured to broadcast ripples of terror amongst the enemy. Sorcerers channel the soul-blasting energies of the warp into potent hexes and blasts of nerve-shredding weird flame, and they alter the foe's perceptions with nightmarish illusions. Because of their constant exposure to the power of the warp, sorcerers are inevitably haunted by the prospect of eventually succumbing to crippling mutation or insanity. Though they believe they are above mortal concerns, the truth is that they, too, are pawns raised up and then expended by the power of Slaanesh. Some sorcerers are cold-hearted strategists who vent their hatred upon the universe. Others act as advisors for the commanders of the Emperor's children, subtly redirecting them to their own ends under the illusion of servitude. All have their own agendas and ambitions, some hidden with hallucinatory misdirection, others openly revelled in. Some make their lairs in the twisted spires of the warband's void ships, letting the raw stuff of the warp bathe their chameleonic flesh and listening to the whispers of demons. Others wear atavistic fetishes of twisting skin and sentient organs, or garb themselves in glistening robes of impossible colours. Some become flesh puppet go-betweens for powerful demons, and many seek demonhood themselves. Chaos spawn. Most Emperor's children who tread the path to glory die before achieving their egotistical ambition. Their aim to earn Slaaneish's blessing is itself fraught with horrific danger. Those who receive too many are twisted in mind and body. These Chaos Spawn, as they are known, are insane, mewling creatures with no mental powers or self-awareness. No two Chaos Spawn are alike. Such a mutated horror may sport mismatched limbs or pseudopods, be festooned with multiple faces, or bulge with excessive flesh in sickening hues. Some bear questing fingers for teeth, or co-joined familiars that croon nonsense verse. Emperor's children view spawndom with horror. Though individual spawn are hailed as beauteous manifestations of Slaaneish's dark artistry, they are not capable of sensing and appreciating their capabilities. Fulgrim's sons cannot abide the thought of an existence divorced from feeling the pleasure and pain of battle, or of recognising their superiority any more. Lucius the Eternal, swordsman, soul thief, blade of eons. A seemingly immortal blade fighter of superlative skill and egregious ego, Lucius has funneled lifetimes of experience into raising his already consummate swordsmanship to almost supernatural superiority. He is host to a curse that has seen him return from death many times, each resurrection leaving him more hollow than the last, but compelled to become greater still. During the Great Crusade, Lucius rose to become an officer in the Emperor's Children Legion, yet it was his skill with the blade that lifted him above most of his battle brothers. Lucius began to take pleasure only from testing his skills against the greatest opponents he could find. Over time, he came to equate pain with victory, carrying the scars of his duels with pride and carving his flesh to link the scars into a disfiguring pattern. When Fulgrim turned traitor during the Horus Heresy, Lucius gladly followed in his footsteps. As the Legion slid deeper into excess, Lucius searched out legendary fighters amongst both traitors and loyalists, bested alien warlords, and dazzled in the gladiatorial contests the Emperor's children organised amongst themselves. It was during one such contest that Lucius was killed by Lord Commander Sirius. The infamous duellist inflicted an agonising death upon Lucius that was an experience of transcendent pleasure. Over time, however, Sirius's flesh and armour began to change. Days passed, then weeks, during which dark lines surfaced from under his skin, erupting in a pattern of livid scars. Before long, Lucius was emerging. His mind and body asserted themselves, and Sirius was painfully absorbed. All that was left of the Lord Commander was a screaming face, caught in a moment of agony and subsumed into Lucius's armour. Whatever gas had been laid on Lucius, it seems clear to other Emperor's children that it is the work of Slaanesh. They believe the Dark Prince is loath to let such an entertaining champion meet his end in anything less than a divinely extravagant manner, if at all. In the millennia since that first horrific resurrection, Lucius has returned from death each time. How, when, and where it happens never seems to occur the same way twice. He has emerged from within the flesh of a 6-armed alien mercenary aboard a void ship light years from his place of death. He has pushed his way out of a gory pit of putrefying servitor offcuts on a forge world. He once surfaced from the living metal of a cryptek centuries after his death at the hands of the Necron's mindless automata. It is said by other Emperor's children, carefully out of Lucius's earshot, that whosoever kills him and takes even a moment's satisfaction from the act will find themselves slowly transforming into him. Whatever the truth, there are tormented faces upon Lucius's armour that he doesn't recognise, deaths he cannot remember, and lifetimes between extinctions that he cannot account for. Lucius does not know how many times he has died. each time he returns, wears away at his fragile sanity, but more so at his pride. However painful his return is to the individual he subsumes, the swordsman cannot escape the knowledge that it was a foe he did not kill with his own skill. Lucius is forever denied the chance to prove his superiority against them, and that thought enrages him. His return to existence usually commences with a murderous slew of butchery, as Lucius seeks to smother any introspection with acts of exemplary and immediate savagery. Lucius' obsession with his skill is mirrored by his contempt for every other sentient being. He has led small groups and entire war hosts of heretics with unnatural charisma and total confidence, but sees in them only a means to further his own need to test himself against the galaxy's greatest warlords. Most recently, he has forged a warband known as the Faultless from the remnants of his Emperor's Children followers, as well as traitors from other legions and renegades from loyalist chapters. With a promise to gift them victories and sensations they could achieve serving no other, Lucius has led them on a sybaritic crusade of violent indulgence. With shriek, lash, and blade. Lucius's haunted battle plate, the armour of shrieking souls, always manifests with him, writhing with the howling spirit fragments of all those he has previously subsumed, a chorus now joined by his latest victim. In battle, the faces contort and scream, emitting a psychosonic torrent that can shred flesh and shatter minds. While foes' senses are battered by his armour's empiric assault, Lucius weaves deadly arcs with his sword and living whip. The blade of the Lear was discovered by Fulgrim before the outbreak of the Horus heresy, in a Xenos fane of overwhelming colours and sounds, and he is said to have later gifted it to Lucius. The sword is steeped in the power of the warp and pulsates with an aura of sublime malignity. It is a master duelist's weapon, and with its quicksilver edge, Lucius has taken the heads of chapter masters, Xenos tyrants, and chaos lords in profusion. The lash of torment squirms and coils in agitation, even outside of battle. Parasitic hooks and barbs line the length of co-joined demonic sinew that appears to grow from within Lucius's armour. The barbs rasp and slice armour and flesh, and the lash binds and constricts those who mean Lucius harm, leaving them vulnerable to an ostentatious coup de grace. The fate of Lucius's armour appears somehow permanently bound up with his own. This is also the case with his warp-tainted sword and sentient whip of demon flesh, but they have not always appeared at his rebirth. Lucius has been forced to undertake extended quests of discovery across the galaxy, only to uncover them in the hands of other champions or hidden in some forgotten vault. No matter how it happens, these weapons always find their way back to the swordsman somehow or other. They are a part of his curse, whether he wants them or not. Scalathraxine dust. Once ground into a warrior's eyes, this substance takes root in their ocular tissues. Filaments of sorcerous crystal grow like brittle hairs, scratching and cutting their eye sockets, growing deeper into the rest of their cranial cavities. The unbearable agony eventually drives the warrior insane. There are rumours amongst some warbands, however, that some individuals reach a symbiosis, with lurid tales of crystalline stalks piercing their skulls from the inside like glassy spines. Flawless blades. Degenerate, stim-saturated sword fighters with the fixation of addicts. Flawless blades are a devolved continuance of the ancient Palatine blades. They are hideous in appearance, bearing an unsettling similarity to some demons of Slaanesh. These masterful fighters are too selfish to share their flesh with such warp-spawned entities, but do bear the rewards of the Dark Prince. Flawless Blades see themselves as the greatest fighters of their warband. Whatever their former existence, a legionary of the line, a champion aspiring to greatness, or even a warlord who commanded armies, their obsession with displaying their prowess in the cut and thrust of blade fighting has overwhelmed all other considerations. They gather in elitist groups, setting themselves apart from their fellow Emperor's children, and instead fighting to prove their superiority in front of each other. The boastful arrogance of Flawless Blades makes them despised by those who fight alongside them. They proudly cultivate a sneering disregard for fellow warriors they see as worthy only of securing an arena for the Flawless Blades to display their gruesome artistry. Each of these sword masters carries personalised masterwork weapons, honed to lethal perfection over countless battles. With long, powered bliss blades, or two-handed exemplar bliss blades, fashioned and ornamented to complement their bloody displays, they hack and sever their foes in gory dismemberments. Though they perceive themselves as paragons of perfection, their assaults are cackling whirlwinds of madness, devoid of restraint. Flawless Blades deride the concept of the economical killing strike and the merciful execution. They tear their enemies apart in fountains of blood and sprays of armour fragments, as often leaving their victims to bleed out in screaming agony behind them as executing them. All that matters is the excess of the display and humbled acknowledgement of all who see them that the Flawless Blades are their superiors. Their duels, whether on blood-soaked battlefields, in gladiatorial bouts, or in grand impromptu arenas of their own imagining, as they hack and slash their way across nameless alien worlds, demonstrate their capacity to kill anyone and anything they choose. Each Flawless Blade is an ostentatious show-off, dazzling and delighting their fellow hedonists with displays of excessive blade work, psychotic cruelty, and fixated sadism. They parade their contempt for the enemy, carrying themselves with haughty vigour and exposing themselves to danger. So assured are they that no foe could threaten them. Flawless Blades wear exotic and unique forms of battle plate that leave portions of their flesh unprotected, the better to demonstrate their perceived invulnerability. Whatever delusions and manias grip their fevered minds, however, Flawless Blades are horrifically powerful. They are towering exemplars of corruption and excess. Their genetically augmented flesh is saturated with constant infusions of tainted biostims, chemhancers, xenos suppurations, and countless other substances. The power of the warp flows through them as well. Their flesh is stretched, swollen, and contorted, the skin and bone of their faces warped into leering countenances redolent of demons. Most Flawless Blades augment their obvious gifts of Slaanesh with more prosaic but no less hideous surgeries and biografts. Some have their limbs reshaped or demand subdermal implants that fuse their bones into new forms. Others have their skin flensed to reveal slabs of glistening musculature, or have their pores altered to emit sickening hormonal essences or chameleonic patterns. It is all a part of their display, ensuring that none who see even a horrified glimpse of them are denied a rapturous frisson of delight. The audiences that Flawless Blades fight to impress and entertain are not only those of their allies and enemies. In the warp, demons of Slaanesh gather in patron shoals around each of these swordsmen, peering through the veil to witness exotic strikes and painful slashes delivered with artistic grace or rabid frenzy. They are said to sing appreciatively for their individual champions, gifting their chosen warrior with warped invigoration or demonic resilience should an enemy show signs of spoiling the entertainment the Flawless Blades provide. Such unholy patronage is keenly sought by the sword fighters, and even contested between them, for a demon's gaze can swiftly shift to another. To wrench demonic favour from another flawless blade is a temptation of such sweet spite that the debased warrior will go to any lengths to overshadow their rivals. Chorals of warp power buoy the favoured flawless blades to new heights of obsessive urgency and murderous excess. Ethereal mantles shield them from inferior enemies attempting to strike them down from a distance. Empiric omens flicker through the flawless blades' minds, luring them to new sites of depraved bloodshed, or teasing them with the locations of prime fleeing enemies. The attention of the Dark Prince's demonic servants and their changeable gifts have consequences, however. The desperation of flawless blades to gain such favour mirrors their insatiable compulsion not to lose it. Evading the boundless opportunities of a battlefield arena, an incapacity to strike down an opponent, and lacklustre passions eclipsed by others, there are many ways for a flawless blade to displease their demonic audience. Should the warriors fail to deliver stimulating enough performances, then the circling patron demons are as likely to take their glut of screams and pain from the flawless blade themselves. Whether in a frenzied swirl of immaterial fangs and claws, the tearing out of their transhuman soul, or the slow plucking apart of their identity over long years, the unworthy warrior provides their former patrons with all the pleasure they failed to display in life. Siren's Veil. This neon-bright ooze was first perfected as a cruel toxin. So extreme were the agonies perceived in the foe, however, that it was deemed too precious to waste on lesser beings. The imbiber's auditory canals are engorged, warped, and thickened with iridescent pus that transmits the deafening music of the battlefield to centres of the mind unreachable to those without sorcerous intervention. Lord's Cacophonist. Orchestrators of excruciating oral barrages, Lord's Cacophonist direct the firepower of their followers in atonal dirges. Such sonic attacks are capable of shattering the most resilient defensive line, rupturing the flesh and bone of enemies who stand before them, or destroying barricades entirely. Howling peals of sonic destruction are the battle cries of a Lord Cacophonist. These beings fixate on experiencing aural extremes and forcing such sensations upon those less blessed to endure them. A Lord Cacophonist often leads squads of noise marines, expertly orchestrating their sonic assaults at every scale. It is said by some emperor's children that these warriors can detect mystical acoustic vibrations that exist in fluctuating dimensions within the warp, an echo of which they can sense in real space. Few noise marines reach such an apotheosis of sensitivity, so readily follow a Lord Cacophonist's lead, willing disciples in thrall to one who exemplifies aural excess. Lords Cacophonist are surgically sculpted and empirically warped to a greater extreme than noise marines. Their flesh and armour have grown into whorls and cinerous membranes that focus and distort the sound waves and energistic spectra around them. Strange phenomena gather wherever a Lord Cacophonist goes. Rhyming whispers, painful spikes of noise, soul shudders that are said to echo with lascivious portents. Unsettling pipework ending in fluting demonic gullets coils around and through their bodies, melded irrevocably with their flesh and armour. The tubules eventually rise in a macabre and many-moored projection unit. These doom sirens magnify and twist every sound a Lord Cacophonist makes. From the whir of their armour's ancient servos to the guttural rasp of their every breath, from the tympanic thudding of their hearts to the sluice of fluids through their internal organs, everything is projected in a non-stop aural barrage that thrums out from them. The constant song is tinged by warp taint and draws crooning accompaniment from demons lurking behind the fragile skin of real space. The noise weakens physical matter, shaking chemical and atomic bonds with eldritch vibrations and making them vulnerable to the Lord Cacophonist's disciples. Armour and bone sag or become brittle under the assault. Fortress walls can crumble or shiver into insubstantial states. Those enemies who dare attempt to close with the Lord Cacophonist feel the pulsing throb almost as a solid obstacle, slowing their advance and sapping their will or driving them back, even as they attempt to push through it. When a Lord Cacophonist emits a raucous utterance or bellows their terrifying war cry, his doom siren amplifies it into a terrifying sonic attack that can crack armour, splinter bones, and pulp flesh. The champion resounds with thunderous harmonics and needle-sharp echoes that reverberate outwards. They are joined by the pleasured cries of their disciples, temporarily drowning out the noise of mundane battle. Even those on the fringe of the attack's effect suffer cranial hemorrhages or are rendered comatose, leaving them at the mercy of the Lord Cacophonist's thrumming power blade. Noise Marines. Noise Marines wear armour painted in various bold colours, as their senses are so distorted that only the most extravagant shades and patterns register in their minds. The staccato bark and blast of ferocious firepower is music to the Noise Marines' ears, and many specialise in the use of a variety of outlandish sound-based weapons. Noise Marines are Heretic Astartes warriors devoted to Slaanesh, who crave greater discordant aural experiences and employ esoteric sonic weaponry in battle. Groups of Noise Marines are known to have arisen, or at least served, amongst several traitor legions and renegade chapters, but they are most widespread amongst the Emperor's children, where they originated, and amongst whom they are also known as cacophony. They represent a single obsessive facet of the Emperor's children's lust for sensory extremes, in this case, that of intense sonic experiences. Most Noise Marines have had their auditory senses carved open and rearranged by eldritch surgery, with additional organs grafted into place that have empiric or xenos origins. Other Noise Marines have submitted to sorcerous flesh-shaping or biochemical saturation to make them increasingly sensitive to both mundane sounds and those far beyond ordinary human hearing. Some who count themselves greatly blessed have been subjected to all of these and more, including strange mutations from prolonged exposure to the warp. Due to their altered neural makeup, the louder and more discordant the sounds they perceive, the more extreme their emotional reaction. After millennia of deafening atrocities, now only the din of war and the screams of the dying can stir a Noise Marine. They revel in deafening detonations, shrieks of tearing metal, high-frequency ruptures of energy waves, bursts of infrasound capable of collapsing internal organs, the snap of bone and the wail of those in pain. In battle, they create pyrotechnic explosions by unleashing psychosonic weaponry at excruciating volumes. Sonic blasters are their most common armament, weapons that unleash waves of devastating harmonics to rip their target apart, whether in short riffs or long discordant wails. Heavier weapons include blastmasters that focus a throbbing bass note into an explosive crescendo that can burst eyeballs and rupture organs at one frequency, while at others it can deliquesce the hardened armour of battle tanks. With the clashing music of destruction and torment raised to a heady pitch around them, Noise Marines wade through the cacophony they cause, drinking in the music of the apocalypse. As just one example of the rewards granted by the Prince of Pleasure to those who worship him, a Noise Marine's hearing is 1,000 times more sensitive than a normal Space Marine's. They can distinguish the subtlest pitch in tone and volume, but are only able to enjoy the most deafening of cacophonies. Such raucous sensory input electrifies the noise marine's brain, causing extreme emotional stimulation that makes all other sensations seem pale and worthless. The louder and more discordant the noise, the more extreme the emotional reaction provoked. Sonic weaponry. When the Emperor's children go to war, it is to the excruciating shriek of an array of outlandish sonic weaponry that splinters reality and rasps at the nerves of all who hear it. These psychoacoustic weapons find their ultimate expression in the hands of noise marines, who arm themselves with the widest variety. But other Emperor's children are known to wield examples as well. Amongst the Emperor's children, the origins of their devastating sonic weaponry is tangled in Legion myth and embroidered with grotesque and contradictory details. Some of these tales point to the legendary carousal said to have erupted on Fulgrim's flagship, Pride of the Emperor, in the early years of the heresy. Others claim to have treated with Xenos, who provided the base technologies. Some delight in retelling the story of a favoured composer of the Primarch, who feverishly scrawled the first notes of the cacophony in blood upon her chamber walls, after cutting off her own hands in dismay that she would never be able to replicate the music of the warp echoing in her head. Whatever the truth, while other traitors and renegades enthralled to Slaanesh have been known to use these extravagant weapons, they have always been most widespread amongst the Emperor's children. The sonic weapons used by Emperor's children warbands do not share any but the most superficial technologies and surface features with each other. As with all war gear carried by the Legion's warriors, each is worked upon by their wielder or demon-haunted artificer until they are perverse artifacts of uniquely abhorrent design. They are creations that meld the physical with the warp's taint. Each weapon thrums with its own harrowing malignity, draws upon particular materials and energies, and unleashes horror and destruction in its unique pitches and tones. Beyond the weapons which are carried by noise marines, there are often others fitted into weapon cupolas, worked into grenade harnesses, or built into the miles-long superstructures of a warband's void ships. There are warp amps built into the hulls of battle tanks and combat walkers that thrum with a non-stop dirge of spirit-twisting horror. Some warriors brandish howl talons that shriek with orgiastic glee when they touch living flesh and shiver apart the cellular bonds in sprays of bloody mist. All employ some form of psychosonic attack, drawing the screaming harmonics of the warp and setting it loose. Screamer pistols. Screamer pistols emit screeches near the limit of mortal endurance. The weapon is compact and excruciatingly effective in close quarters. The ammunition substances it uses are compressed in arcane rituals that refine the resulting emissions into a piercing scream. Honed to a scalpel edge, the shriek can punch through armour. Even those whose battle plate protects them from the physical effects are deafened and numbed. Their armour conveys the high-pitched vibration to every part of the body as they are shaken and pulped, even as their mind reels from the sensation of 1,000 blades slicing into them at once. Doom sirens. A doom siren appears as a complex arrangement of pipes, tubes, and amplifiers that magnify the ecstatic war cries of the bearer into devastating, short-ranged sonic attacks. Doom siren oral architecture often runs through the warrior's body, filling chest cavities and splitting respiration organs in insane routes that draw not only the bearer's breath, but also their spite and rage into rasping and agonized howls. Lords cacophonists especially revel in the glorious pain they suffer with each warp-augmented wail. However, the pain inflicted by the weapon upon its wielder is as nothing to the gut-rupturing torment unleashed upon those caught in the Doom Siren's blast wave. With rapid microchanges in harmonics and pitch, atomic fractures are driven into those that bear the full brunt of the attack. In the space of a heartbeat, armour flakes and gusts away in streams of metallic dust. With rapid microchanges in harmonics and pitch, atomic fractures are driven into those that bear the full brunt of the attack. In the space of a heartbeat, armour flakes and gusts away in streams of metallic dust. Flesh bubbles and runs, sloughing away from its bone foundations, which themselves soon crumble. Emperor's children bearing a doom siren often spit a signature word through the device. Many choose to shout their own name, thrilled at the thought that their identity itself is enough to destroy vehicles and kill scores. Sonic blasters. Bulky, demon-moored projection units. These weapons, carried by most noise marines, are referred to by the general term of sonic blaster. Noise marines use them to unleash waves of crippling harmonics into the enemy, and they revel in the combination of clashing echoes and pained screams that reverberate back to them. Sonic blasters bear all manner of compression rigs, soul vibrators, psycho-siren dials, and many other devices to alter their attacks. Noise marines use these with abandon, frantically changing the neural pitch and rhythmic howl of their sonic blasters through as many clashing discordant chords as possible. The rune-bound canisters that provide a sonic blaster with its ammunition contain substances that are exotic and bizarre in equal measure. From the compressed final scream of an exploding Catan shard to the tortured spirit stones of an extended Eldari family. From the rage of an enchained demonic entity to the bio-vibrations of sentient scum scraped from the skulls of captured sorcerers. These substances can be vented in short riffs that shred flesh, or protracted screams that puncture the soul. Blastmasters. Blastmasters are long-barreled support weapons that noise marines use to focus a throbbing bass note into an explosive crescendo. The audible noise that enemies detect is like the growl of a hungry god, so deep and powerful that the ground trembles while eyes, eardrums, and internal organs judder, then rupture. By varying the frequency of the blast, the effect of the weapon can be altered to produce differing effects. At the more audible end of the attack spectrum, the dissonant roar can ravage whole squads and entire lengths of defensive lines, snapping bones, rending ceramite armour, and inducing terrifying hallucinations of distended demonic jaws. With more focused emissions, the empiric sound wave is audible only to noise marines and the psychically sensitive. At such settings, blastmasters have been known to rupture the reinforced hulls of land raiders and shatter force fields protecting bastions like a glass decanter struck by the perfect resonant pitch. There are boasts of blastmasters inverting energy barriers to fry those they are meant to defend, or twisting gunship gravitic emitters to crush their own crews. Sanctus 6. A single dose of this amniotic scum, harvested from the control tanks of prized loyalist titans, painfully meshes the user to their armour. It is a rarefied substance available only from those tanks whose defeated occupants have been kept alive and tormented, then allowed to putrefy within their god machine's amniotic tank. The tank is slowly drained over the warband's victory feasts, favoured warriors permitted to drink a goblet of the diminishing fluid before the final remnants are suitably steeped. Aspirants of superiority. Driven onward by their worship of Slanesh, all of Fulgrim's sons are stained by excess, body and soul. While their champions are the most visibly tainted, the warriors who form the bulk of most warbands are just as eager to indulge their own obsessions of sensory extremes. The legionaries of Emperor's Children warbands live for their own fixated desires. Some nurture ambitions of dominance, awaiting only a moment of weakness in those above them, but visceral experience is all most care about. Tormentors. Bands of tormentors echo the tactically adaptable squads that were once the mainstay of the Emperor's Children Legion before the horrors of the heresy. They are clad in corrupted and garishly appointed suits of power armour and armed with over-ornamented bolt guns. Yet while tormentors' weapons and armour mostly continue to operate as they always have, the same cannot be said for tormentors themselves. They see themselves as embodying the noble ideal of true Space Marines, rather than the loyalists whom they perceive to be weaklings chained in stultifying dogma. But in truth, they are little more than self-serving and egomaniacal reavers. Tormentors are fixated with a self-inflated opinion of their role in every battle. Strategies are only elegant, they observe, when revolving around them. Squads of tormentors sometimes assign themselves special missions amid combat, inventing tactical objectives to showcase their skills according to their latest whim, or even applying them retroactively to justify their excesses. Whatever reckless self-indulgence they are guilty of, however, is tolerated by their lords, thanks to their ability as devastating shock troops. They are given free rein to aggressively take ground from the enemy and move swiftly on. Tormentors abhor the concept of holding dull and prosaic patches of battlefield when there are fresh sensations to be chased elsewhere, and they revel in ostentatious glory kills in preference to providing practical support to their fellow warriors. Tormentors obsess over their ranged weapons. Most fetishize their bolt guns, taking gratification in having mastered the symbolic weapon of the Corpse Emperor's old legions, and, in their eyes at least, raised its use to an art form. Many tormentors demand the entirety of their armour's auto-senses be intertwined with their weapon. Others have the warband's artificers fit the weapons with arcane haptic triggers or mutated interfaces of nerve-rich tendrils. Some tormentors secure more potent ranged weapons with which to illustrate their skill, such as plasma guns or melter guns. These may be gifts of favour, torn from the dead hands of despised comrades, or offered as incentives to those capable of impressing the obsessionists who lead the squads. Such focused energy weapons are preferred by tormentors over more indiscriminate firearms. Of the elixirs and narcovirals prevalent amongst the Emperor's children, tormentors often become dependent upon those that supposedly enhance their already acute senses and fine motor control. After deploying the contents of their stimjectors, their ability to draw a bead on their prey becomes almost supernatural. Some become capable of seeing, hearing, and smelling their victim's frailty. The grind of ill-maintained servos, the smell of chemical imbalances, the subtle favouring of one limb over another. These sensations feed into their hunter's instincts, enabling tormentors to target weak spots with maximum accuracy, frequently with showy execution shots or repeated penetrations of the same location on the target to minuscule tolerances. These states of euphoria rarely last long, but tormentors see the harrowing after effects as just another sensation to savour. Infractors. Pounding with transhuman speed from one savage confrontation to the next, their tainted blood seething with cocktails of noxious stimulants, infractors only care that their next fight is more bloody, extreme, and sensationally wanton than the last. Unless given sufficient incentive to do otherwise, infractors will kill, move on, and kill again. They are often arrogantly indifferent to strategic manoeuvring. Viewing the enemy's position as a personal affront, infractors push deep into hostile territory, drawn there to kill for its own sake. Infractors rarely fight as part of a cohesive and mutually supportive battle line. They expect other Emperor's children to keep up with them and viciously resent, vocally and occasionally lethally, efforts from fellow warriors to restrain their advances. Infractors are always looking for the next challenge, the next delicious threat into which to carve some new and painful lesson of sensational suffering, and other Emperor's children know they are not particular about who they slice open when the insatiable hunger is upon them. They possess a monstrous ego, viewing the battlefield as their own domain. It is an arena gifted to them, they believe, from Slaanesh, set as a stage and peopled with beings who exist only to be artfully sliced apart. In battle, Infractors wield wickedly sharp dueling sabres and bolt pistols. They view their weapons as tools with which to make bloody flourishes upon the galactic canvas, though any aesthetic sensibilities they once possessed have long since been smothered by a streak of psychotic violence that is at turns obsessive and indolent. Squads of Infractors vie with each other to carve the most visceral trail of destruction into the enemy's heart. If they are not consumed by bitter jealousy, other Emperor's children who come in the Infractor's wake may be inspired by the garlands of intestinal filth, accented with arterial sprays against a backdrop of ruptured armour and splintered bones. Suffusing these scenes are the ripe scents of bodily fluids, and often cries of agony, ecstasy, and outrage from their foes, for squads of Infractors occasionally spare a handful of those they encounter. Sometimes this is to enrich their trail of carnage with their victims' pain or impotent vengeance. At other times, survivors are left through pure indifference and apathy, suddenly forgotten as a new victim comes into view. Chaos Rhinos. Steeped in 10,000 years of bloodshed and treachery upon countless battlefields, suffused with the corruptive power of the warp, still the rhino remains the most widespread and reliable transport in use by almost every Emperor's Children warband. Tough, rugged and adaptable, these tanks have endured incrustation with effulgent and obscene augmentations. Amongst Fulgrim's sons, Chaos Rhinos serve the whims of his champions as gilded and illuminated chariots that speed their warriors into battle, protected by layers of advanced plating. Some warbands adorn the tank's armour in eye-bleeding frescoes, or mount them with slabs of exotic rock carved with grotesques. Other rhinos sprout leering gargoyles or fluted maws that project resonant warp energies. The most disturbing have had their once noble machine spirits sacrificed to Slaanesh. Their carcasses are possessed by warp entities, their metal hides heave with sentience, and their transport bay innards glisten with trembling cilia. Armoured excess. Many are the obsessed warriors and twisted war engines amongst the warbands of Fulgrim's sons. From ancient relics and veteran sadists overloaded with millennia of arrogance, to abominations of haunted iron and flesh, all are as damned as their depraved gene-sire. The Emperor's children deny themselves no form of cruel expression. Where there are warriors who indulge in swift assaults, there are also those who take pleasure in overwhelming firepower girded in mantles of heavy armour. Chaos Terminators. Debased suits of Terminator armour offer Emperor's children the raw power to bludgeon their way through swarms of lesser foes and the ability to endure apocalyptic attacks. The sensation of being a looming god of battle sees many of Fulgrim's sons crave these ancient suits of battle plate. They are prestigious artefacts for those who can claim them. Veteran warriors who do so are already amongst the most skilled of their warbands, having won the armour through depraved patronage, or else torn it from the still warm corpse of its former owner. Chaos Terminators arrogantly lord their power over other Emperor's children and display utter contempt for their enemies. Paranoia and suspicion often take root in those with power, and Chaos Terminators amongst Fulgrim's sons are driven to obsessively re-establish their elite status at every opportunity. They deliver the killing blow in masterfully staged assaults. They dare the enemy's most heavily defended strongholds, ripping out the heart or cutting off the head of whatever force opposes them. They excel in boarding actions where lurking horrors and treacherous environments alike conspire to bring them down. Even foes who hide behind fortress walls or shielded bulkheads are not safe from Chaos Terminators. Their armour is so resilient that squads of them can be delivered into battle via sorcerous portals or ancient teleportarium shrines, appearing in flashes of sickly energy to begin an eager slaughter. It is not enough for Terminator armoured Emperor's children that their veteran skill and bulky armour set them apart. Instead, their desire for visible preeminence causes many to manifest strange warp mutations, while others demand gaudy flourishes from the warband's artificers. Leering maws are worked into the ammunition drums of combi bolters. Stimjector ports are fitted to administer chemical shunts. Jeweled lenses are wired into the warrior's own flesh. Some employ envenomed blades or enhance their auto-senses to allow them to feel every visceral tear of their foe's flesh. Other changes are seen as gifts of Slaanesh or, amongst a few warbands, of Fulgrim himself. Helmets may elongate into obscene snouts, armoured boots swell into lumpen hooves, and the digits of power fists grow into cruel talons. Fleshy growths push their way out of upper carapaces. After millennia of war and corruption, such armour often reflects the damned soul within. Chaos Land Raiders. Many Emperor's Children warbands maintain assets of the former Legion that date back to the murky age of darkness and before. Chaos Land Raiders are amongst the most ancient still to raise a guttural roar of incense-strewn exhaust in prideful challenge across the galaxy. They are heavy and powerful transport tanks, multi-skinned in thick armour and armed with potent weapons. Many Emperor's Children commanders use their rare surviving examples as bullish status symbols, adorning their transports in lurid heraldries painted in toxic and hallucinatory substances. As frontline assault tanks, Chaos Land Raiders serve as the prongs of spearheads that delve deep into enemy lines, disgorging elite warriors where they can sate their worst excesses. When the tank's armoured hatches slam open, sprays of chemical stimulant wash over each warrior as they lunge from the hold into battle. Many of these war engines also broadcast psychostatic siren songs from hull-mounted emitters to suppress the enemy's ability to mount an effective response. Demon engines. Patchwork monstrosities of rune-carved mechanisms, mutated flesh and malignant sentience, demon engines are seen amongst many Emperor's Children warbands. Some of Fulgrim's sons, obsessed with the transgressive abominance of demon engines, as well as the domination of the caged Slaaneshi entities that animate them, specialise in their creation. Other demon engines are obtained from heretics of the Dark Mechanicum, procured through pacts struck with the agents of Vashtor the Archaphane, or stolen from other renegades and bound to the service of the Emperor's Children. Anarchic and degenerate examples of their kind, Mauler fiends rampage alongside the most thrill-hungry Emperor's Children at the forefront of battle. They are bestial constructs, driven by the animus of a demon whose preference is for hunting craven prey. Using huge talons and metallic tendrils, they can scale fortress walls and smoking piles of burnt-out battle tanks to reach their quarry. Neon ectoplasmic drool seeps from their maws as they close with their target. They rip and slash those they reach with insane sweeps of their claws, snapping through spines with their iron jaws and guzzling chunks of bloody flesh, attempting to reap a succulent morsel of their prey's soul. Helldrakes, by comparison, are airborne demon engines. Most are corrupted and possessed constructs that were once the superior fighter craft of the Emperor's children. The piercing shrieks they emit as they dive in for the kill are usually the last thing their prey hears before these raptorial horrors crash into them, razor-sharp claws slicing. Helldrakes hunt in the updrafts over battlefields, sniffing amongst the clouds of promethium, blood and perfumed musk for the sole scent of worthy victims. Their favoured prey is enemy aircraft. With their corrupted thrusters and the push of empiric winds, they can intercept even swift fighters. Lurid fire or streams of shot gush from their dragon-like jaws before they rake their talons through fuselage and flesh as they secure their dominion of the skies. Shiver Splint. When injected into drilled channels in the bones of a legionary, this soup of Xenos marrow and psychoplasm binds with the warrior's skeleton. Their bones alter, the arcane expertise that went into their creation perverted to cause the weeping of a gruesome froth that sluices through their flesh and eventually bleeds from their pores. It collects in a dense jellied gruel within their armour. Many Emperor's children deride Shiver Splint's users as fools chaining themselves in lumpen flesh, but its adherents claim a perfection of unity with their battle plate that none others can know. Demons of Slaanesh. As Slaanesh embodies myriad dark dualities, so do his demons exist as manifestations of hideous contradictions. They are mesmerizing yet loathsome, abhorrently bestial yet eerily graceful. They spill from warp tears in spatters of perfumed gore and rush to slake an immortal thirst by eliciting the most nightmarish of extreme sensations in their mortal prey. Drawn to obsession, depraved acts of mutilation, and the frenzied passions quickened by war, the Dark Prince's demonic servants joyfully bound forth to glut themselves to immortal excess. Keepers of Secrets. The greater demons known as Keepers of Secrets are towering monstrosities that serve Slaanesh as the generals of his demonic legions and as avatars of soul corruption. At times, a Keeper of Secrets will work subtly, beguiling or possessing even the supposedly incorruptible to spread Slaanesh's damnation. However, when they manifest in real space, there is nothing inconspicuous in their terrifying majesty. An impossible beauty radiates from them, so hideous that stoic warriors have gouged their own eyes out after a glance. Hypnotic odours and lights pour from their lacquered flesh. Dirges harmonise with the tinkling of obscene jewellery and the scrape of their clawed hooves shredding the wills of mortals. The blissful joys of the battlefield are these demons' favoured harvests. They lunge into those who have not already fled, taking a sadistic pleasure in every excruciating death and horrific abuse they inflict. With long claws or curved blades, they gouge through thick armour plating and rend the enemy's flesh. They coil phantasmagorical illusions into the minds of their foe until insanity grips entire battle groups. Contorted corpses are all that mark the passage of these nightmares, the victims' flayed faces fixed in rictus masks of ecstasy and terror. Demonettes. These ravaging foot soldiers of the Dark Prince, lilting courtesans and spree tormentors, dance into reality with an insatiable hunger for sensation. From a distance, Their crooning songs and lissom silhouettes erode the mental defences of their enemies. As they close with their victims, their inhuman features and unholy squeals become apparent, but by then it is too late. A scintillating glamour envelops the demon's newfound playthings, eliciting a self-loathing lethargy that makes retreat and defence achingly slow. The demonette's claws descend in lethal caresses, piercing armour and slicing exposed skin. The demons emit alluring empiric siren calls to those in sealed war engines or buried bunkers, twisting the souls of those hiding within until they can bear it no longer, unlocking the hatches while screaming at themselves to stop. Driven by Slaaneish's will, demonettes cavort across the battlefields of reality in search of new delights to savour. They hiss curses and snarl at each other, contesting favoured prey with snapping claws. They are appreciative, however, of the attempts by mortals to exceed their own excesses. Pain, torment and ecstatic agonies, whether caused by Fulgrim's sons or the enemy, never fail to draw screams of delight from demonettes. Seekers. Some demonettes ride sinuous and muscled steeds, freakish abominations possessed of whip-fast speed. Such riders are known as seekers. Their demonic steeds weave through debris and enemy fire, leaping craters and trench lines as their powerful limbs push them forward in loping bounds. Aided by their mount's supernaturally sharp senses, seekers excel at hunting down escaping prey and intercepting enemy ambushes. They outflank the foe and slip past sentries to close on reinforcements, artillery crews, or logistics trains. The haunting songs of the riders and the hooting trills of their steeds precede them until the unnerved foe panic and scatter or fall upon each other in terrified orgies of violence. When seekers finally pounce upon their prey, their steeds flick out their long tongues that glisten with toxic saliva. Using them to ensnare victims, they shudder in delight as they taste the mortal souls before dragging them in range of the seeker's claws. With fanged smiles, perversely beatific and far too wide, the demonettes welcome the horrified morsel to an agonizing oblivion. Fiends. These chimerical demon beasts manifest with arachnid, equine, and reptilian traits. Few exhibit more than a feral intellect. Their instincts for hunting down anything that promises to scream and hurt at the hunt's end, however, are preternatural. In real space, fiends gallop and scuttle alongside other servants of Slaanesh before surging forward with unnatural speed once they sense a target. As their excitement grows, they give out keening cries of psychosonic discordance. They also exude a wave of soporific musk that billows in their grunting snorts and induces a warp-wrought euphoria in all around. Those entranced by it stumble as if in a dream. Overwhelmed by rapture, some move to embrace the oncoming fiends. To do so is to invite a protracted demise. Fiends dissect their prey with oversized claws and immense strength. They snip off layers of tissue, exposing nerves and organs to more invasive abuse. More heavily armoured prey is held in place before the fiend's barbed tail snaps forward with force enough to crack open ceramite and with a stinger loaded with baneful toxins. Shalaxi Hellbane, Monarch of the Hunt. The Keeper of Secrets, known as Shalaxi Hellbane, is, according to tales whispered by mortals, a manifestation of divine superiority, a hunter of such peerless excellence that even immortals must fear for their existence. Shalaxi is an entity of singular obsession, a duelist that brooks no rival and Slaanesh's favoured tool for the humbling of other champions. Regents and warlords, sorcerers, paladins, and tyrannical monstrosities, even the demons of Slaanesh's brother chaos gods, none can escape the bane that is Shalaxi, the monarch of the hunt. Shalaxi tracks and pursues the greatest prey no matter where in existence they attempt to flee or hide. There is no trackless mica desert or methane sea that can hide the trail of the quarry. They cannot lurk in void black nebulae or mask their presence amongst billions of other organisms. The unstinting hunter stalks the victim through unbounded realms of existence and across the twilit boundaries between them. Sooner or later, this demon predator runs them to ground, forcing a confrontation in which not even fate may be enough to save them. The more powerful the prey, the greater the torment they have to fear at Shalaxi's hands, and such pungent emotion is something the demon can taste from eons away. Some prey are compelled to amass armies of thralls to thrust in Shalaxi's path. They do not last long. With curved claws and soul-twisting bewitchments, the hunter swiftly banishes them to an eternity of torment. Hellbane's long spear, meanwhile, is the perfect slayer of far larger prey. With it, the monarch of the hunt has skewered Imperial Knights, tyrannid Biotitans, and Catan shards, and Shalaxi holds a special passion and talent for besting and destroying bloodthirsters of Khorne. Short story. The boom of detonating bolt shells and the screech of alien projectiles reached the master of the dirge as sullen pops and ghostly whines, as he moved his gaze across the promising Xenos shrine and the glade in which it sat. He could see some of his eager warriors had already engaged the Eldari protectors. They surged in audacious forays, hunting the Xenos through stands of slender trees, clusters of ancient structures in pale stone, and curving growths of wraithbone. The master of the dirge refused to rush his assessment of this arena before committing the rest of his force, instead resolved to leave his reckless vanguard to their fate. From where he stood, just inside its circumference, a towering earthwork ringed the entire glade, blocking sight of the maiden world's horizon beyond. The structure appeared to be a continuation of the same undulating terrain, the ground curving up in a concave wall. There was no sign of toolwork or architecture, but equally there was nothing natural about the formation. The sounds of battle faded, smothered into background mundanity as soon as his attention moved on. Chirosenius cared little for such short-lived details. His focus was on a greater whole, on ensuring the entire imminent performance eclipsed all that his formless tumult had created before. Chirosenius beheld a fractal manipulation in the ostensibly natural copses, bluffs, and crystal pools of the glade's sickeningly anemic set dressing, and felt a tremulous thrum emanating from curving extrusions of wraithbone that reared up like the vertebrae of some vitrified worm. Chirosenius sensed a premonitory echo of what could be done here. Some hidden vibration called to him, a whisper from the Dark Prince, surely. The promise of the wraithbone had lured his warriors to the maiden world, but the master of the dirge saw now how his deeds in this place, this sacred place, would add to the Ursong of existence and please listening Slaanesh. Chirosenius at last delivered a series of clipped commands. They were not the cues to begin the grand spectacle, but they would move his performers into the positions demanded by the Ursong. A few warriors inevitably lunged forward on divergent hunting vectors, loosing loud volleys, but they could not spoil what the master of the dirge had in mind. Lavishly ornamented rhino transports, crammed with impatient infractors, rushed along once pristine avenues, gouging ugly troughs of churned mud across them. The last of Chirosenius's gunships pulled away from his deployment stage. They unleashed a hissing barrage of suppression fire into the Eldari positions as they went, less in support of the warriors there and more to dissuade the Xenos from any notions of firing at the gunships themselves. Showers of burning debris fell in the wake of the detonations, just as the last of Chirasenius' favoured cacophony stalked into firing position to either side of him. At his back, halted at the entrance to the shrine's glade, a pair of land raiders and a pack of demon engines growled their displeasure. Squads of tormentors raced each other from cover to cover, firing from the hip as they did so, and eating up the ground between them and the Eldari. Others of Chirasenius' force took opportunistic shots at the Xenos. Most held back for now, their instincts mostly leashed to his command, waiting for his signal to commence. The presence of the alien psychoplastic extrusions had lured Chirasenius into conducting a surface assault. The risk of any orbital bombardment, obliterating the Wraithbone, was too great. But he had needed to feel the beat of the shrine's soul and hear its delicious echoes in person before formulating any strategy. Only now could the Master of the Dirge begin to set the scene. The spindle-limbed Eldari seemed to have no similar sense of restraint. They flitted through the shadows of the Wraithbone growths, unleashing whispering volleys of shuriken and deadly lances of brilliant energy before darting back into cover like the insects they were. Sweeping a final gaze over the curving landscape and the position of the pieces, noble seekers of ecstasy and failed degenerate Xenos alike, he felt everything was ready. Chirasenius savoured one final moment of discomforting restraint before raising the maws of his doom siren to the heavens and howling a dissonant war cry. The opening movement of Chirasenius' masterpiece began, his exhibition of agony. Volleys of bolter fire and shrieking sonic chords lit up his senses in jagged, uncoordinated ripples. Spite hailers and warp amps flayed in disjointed wails from the hulls of his tanks and the flanks of his demon engines. His commands flew out again and again. They jarred in a deliciously unsettling rhythm with his measured steps as he stalked in the direction of the shrine's centre, one of his noise marine congregations at his heels. Chirasenius heard his own rasping and atonal exhalations with every movement. Most of his orders were delivered as blaring artificial vox, a torrent of false voices he had taken for his own that poured into the warriors' helmets. To his noise marines, he instead shrieked his demands in meta-frequencies, the prosaic data intermingled with oral mysticism only those disciplined would appreciate. Psychosonic energy brushed at Chirasenius' abused senses. It fluttered in coruscating tempos as squads of noise marines unleashed uncoordinated barrages from their outlandish weapons. They did not yet constitute an song, he knew, but they were the alluring vibrations that heralded one. The longer he could sustain the riotous cacophony, the more varied and garish the emotional acoustics, the more ecstatic the final crescendo would be. The thrilling thought of an as-yet uncomposed finale marred Chirasenius' appreciation of his warriors' initial assaults. Abruptly, they became repugnant to his tastes, tepid and uninspired. They needed to be more violent, to billow with excruciating tonal shifts. The Master of the Dirge howled a command at the Land Raiders' crews, flourishing his blade to wave them forward. He sensed the atmospheric compression ahead of the blunt-prowed tanks, and felt a wash of jagged vibration flow over him as they passed to his right. The Land Raiders thundered on a curving route towards the Eldari positions at the glade's far end. They smashed through stands of graceful trees and slammed low walls to rubble, grinding the remnants beneath their barbed treads. Chirasenius accessed the lead Land Raider's sensor array, projecting the noise of the destruction through his own emitters. He moaned in pleasure at the sound of snapping vegetation and grinding rock. Yes, the Master of the Dirge breathed. His hoarse voice was warped, overlaid with mechanical reverberations, musical lilts, and feral growls. He increased his pace, accessing vox feeds to more of his warriors and vehicle crews. Now we can engorge this refrain. The accretion of sonic and more esoteric variables to Chirasenius' masterpiece began. his augmentation of rampancy. With unexpected harmony, his warriors unleashed all manner of firepower. From a blinkered and purely martial viewpoint, much of it was wasted. There were some Xenos casualties, and even a few of his own warriors fell. It was important, however, to appropriately introduce the change in mood that Kyrosenius felt. This was a work of the spirit, intended for a god. Matters of logistics paled in consequence before weightier considerations. Thudding streams of heavy bolter shells scythed through scrub and cracked stone. Air molecules screamed and died in the sizzle of las cannon beams. Now he was nearer. Kyrosenius' hearing picked up more delicious elements still. Shouts of hungry joy from his warriors, thin whimpers of alarm or pain from the Xenos. Now there were the first echoes of the augmentation's initial volleys. They lapped at his senses, growing fractionally more vibrant with each reverberation. It was strange and awe-inspiring, but not wholly unexpected. Kyrosenius had realized that the curving earthwork would reflect and intensify several delightful frequencies. He felt them in his core, refracting and replicating as they moved through the mass of his flesh and armour. More, more, he bellowed. The master of the dirge directed the firepower of his noise marines in discordant thumps and shrieks. Others amongst his force took up the challenge. Rippling harmonics flew from sonic blasters, carving furrows in shrine walls and rending Aldari flesh. The boom of a blastmaster was answered a moment later by its echo, the deadly shockwave funneled by the shrine's strange architecture until it became a gloriously visual blur of insane colours. The desperate Eldari redoubled their efforts, pouring firepower into the Emperor's children or bounding into combat with them. The orgiastic wails of pain from Kyrosenius' warriors blended with the increasing cacophony. Blood sang, bone shivered, flesh trembled in a sacred exhibition of sensation that roared praise of Slanesh. Kyrosenius' fang-like teeth parted slightly. Long cauterized nubs of his facial muscles twitched. A shallow exhalation of spoiled air and a keening arrhythmical accompaniment spilt over his lipless mouth. It was a leer of ecstasy that the master of the dirge had not employed for many centuries.